Hello, everybody. Adrian Plass here.
Yes, and Bridget, hello.
And isn't it, we never really say this, but isn't it great that because of all the stuff since COVID, during COVID, since COVID, that we've made friends with people all over the world, in Australia and America and all around Europe, all sorts of distant places.
It is extraordinary.
So thank you, all those people who have now become some people we really know, and some we've only just started.
And some we'll never meet.
Yeah, some we'll never meet.
I tell you what I loved about, last week we were talking about gardens. Well, you were asking me about it made me feel a bit silly, really, because, I mean, I don't do anything wildly dramatic, really, and looking out at the garden today, I think the garden would say we agree with you. But what was lovely was two particular emails. One was, as you say, from somebody a long way away, somebody who loves their garden in Australia, and somebody in the UK who loves their garden. Because the one in Australia did tune in rather more with your end of gardening, I have to say, Adrian.
Yeah, so I am a bit of an expert looker at gardens.
Yes, a looker-atter, yes. But it was lovely, and it just, I don't know, these things, these small lovely things unify us. And I think for me particularly this week, hearing from those people, because I was able to walk round what to me is one of the most beautiful gardens. It's certainly not mine, but it's the garden at Scargill House, the walled garden. And we were there last weekend, weren't we?
We were. And we first saw that when Scargill House had closed, the conference centre had closed, and it was going to reopen. And we were hoping to be a small part of the new Scargill. And we went to look all around, and the inside of the house looked terrible, looking through the windows. But the walled garden, this huge walls to protect the garden from the Yorkshire weather, was a jungle, but it was a really beautiful jungle.
Well, to be honest, in our romantic not having to do it mode, we did think it was beautiful then.
Oh, it was gorgeous.
And in its being sorted out, maybe it didn't look so beautiful. But
well,
now,
in the process, it didn't,
in the process. But now it's glorious, and it's still the most magical place to be.
Yeah.
So I think the connection of all those things.
And there is a parallel in how the new Scargill started, and you can't make a rule of this, because then you'd lose what we're talking about, which was that we started in chaos, really. There was a lot of disagreement about it. It was very difficult to get through that first period and to really work out what we were doing and why we were doing it and who was doing what. And it grew like a tree. And I think it was all the better for that. And now this new garden is kind of represents something more ordered, but still you need a bit of wildness, don't you? You need a bit of that.
Yes, I suppose you do, really. You certainly need somewhere that stimulates your imagination. That's true. To me, because this last weekend we were following a theme, and it might sound as though it goes against what we're talking about, but it tuned in for me beautifully, because we chose a theme ages ago. It's easy to think of an idea, and then when you have to fulfill that idea, it doesn't seem quite as straightforward. But the theme we chose was the bass note, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you were talking about jazz.
Well, I had written a piece about jazz, which pointed out, the person who was a jazz musician pointed out that they needed the bass line of the pieces they were doing, even when they were improvising a great deal. That there was a sort of dependency, and I'm not a musician, so I don't really understand it, but it just made me think of the fact that every generation of the Christian faith, as it's gone through the centuries, that there has always been a remnant bass note that enables it to continue.
But there's also maybe, and I'm not sure if I would say always, but certainly in our sort of Christian lives, there's been a desire to leave that bass note because it's a bit boring and down there, and start something brand new and sparkling. And the general feeling has been, this time it isn't going to hurt. You know, this time it's going to be wonderful. And we actually had an experience, didn't we, years ago, when a new movement was starting up, of somebody actually referring to the denominations as a dead arm that needed literally cutting off.
Yes, he was standing at the front of the church and waving his arm like a piece of asparagus.
Yes.
And saying, "This is the dead part of the church," which meant the bit before everything got loud and lively and the Holy Spirit was there and all that.
And the problem is that it, like so many other organisations, went wildly out of tune because the bass note, they tried to do without it. And so we were sort of exploring what is that? What is that bass note? It's obviously people are going to have different opinions about this. What is the bass note of our faith?
Well, I mean, obviously, in the Christian faith, you're going to talk about Jesus, but you made a very helpful suggestion that we kind of majored on.
Oh, I did. Yeah. No. It was really helpful because once we started thinking about it, it all sort of came together. And it was not Jesus. It was way before that. It was
Jesus. What does he know?
No,
go on.
I don't know what to say now.
No,
it was Micah,
yeah.
and in a way, the essence of what Jesus followed, I suppose, started again, renewed, refreshed and restored, if you like, which was to seek justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God, not running ahead, not leaving him behind to sort of sort out, the admin, but walking with him. And if you're walking with God, I think inevitably you would feel pretty humble without trying.
Well, I think myself, God is actually quite nice, really. And I think the thing that struck me about that is that all your life, really, you spend a lot of your life comparing yourself with other people and other organisations and deciding whether you're a bit better or not quite as good, and it's a waste of time. I mean, the hunt for humility is a red herring anyway, because once you're humble, you won't realise you're humble because you're too humble. But if you are walking with God, and I've done my share of running on ahead, I think, in my time. Not so much now because I don't want to, but
sometimes I feel it's hard to keep up.
Well, there is that. But yeah, the not comparing yourself with God, but being satisfied, as John Wimber so memorably said, to be small change in his pocket, and to be available when there is something you can help with.
Yeah,
I find that a much more comfortable place to be.
Yes, I mean, we looked, didn't we, at the amazing privilege that we have to be a walk-on part, occasionally a small speaking part, in this great drama of the life of the church. We're it now, that this is our Act 100 and whatever it is, that we are in of the story. That blew our minds a bit, didn't it?
Yeah.
And then we did look at the loving mercy.
Yeah, that's quite startling, really, because you read the Bible is always the same. You read something, and we know that verse from Micah very well. Read it many times, heard it many times, but I personally had never focused on the fact that the justice you look for, and you obviously is important, but you are asked to love mercy. Not to put it on your list of things that are important. Not to find a project that will enable you to learn to be merciful, but something really deep and shining that is in the heart of God is what we are supposed to show to others, and the challenge of that is obvious. Yeah.
I mean, I think it does start to happen the more one trundles along, somewhere along. I think walking humbly with God, I mean, as I say, I don't quite feel I'm quite there. But I think the more you understand the heart of God, the more you realize that he loved mercy, always willing. If one person said, tried to find one good person, could that prevent God from doing the thing that in justice was right to do, whether it was destroying whatever or doing? He was always willing to be bent to somebody's passion for mercy.
That's right. And we talked about Jonah, who found God's mercy extremely annoying.
Extremely annoying.
Because his experience had been that he was a very good preacher. He really made people feel bad about themselves. They then repented and God then forgave them. And obviously Jonah felt he got dislocated from the process somewhere and just ran because the him he had become wasn't a follower anymore.
No.
He was trying to be a leader, like the rich young ruler didn't want to be a follower. But that always defaulting to mercy is a very attractive feature of people, let alone God.
Yes, I mean, I was really fascinated when we were hunting around about the justice side of things. Somebody wrote an article all about the goddess of justice that actually stands on top of our High Court. And there are three things about that statue. One is that she carries a sword to represent justice. One is that she is blindfold to represent impartiality, and the other is that she holds scales. I don't mean the sort of kitchen scales that you might measure your flour in, but she holds the sort of scales with the justice, two pans, sort of, and this point was made that if you're only thinking about justice, then that blindfold means you maybe feel you're being impartial, but actually it creates indifference because you're blindfold and you can't see. And I think that really triggered off a lot of thought in me about the fact that justice we need. Of course we do. I mean, our country has been overwhelmed by the whole business of what was considered the greatest miscarriage of justice, which is this post office scandal. We need justice, but we need it to be tempered with mercy. The undeserved kindness.
But then, we also looked at the prodigal son, and suddenly God, as is so common as far as I can see, departs from the measured norm, and his response to the prodigal son sounds more like reward than punishment.
I think it sounds like fatherhood.
The son goes there thinking, I'll get nothing. Make me a servant, just a servant. That's all I want. And he only goes home because he's hungry, according to the story. And then his father falls all over him. And that isn't that whether he tempered it. I don't know if he did much tempering. I mean
No, I hear what you're saying. I mean, but I'm just saying, no, that's a father. That's a father for you.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got grown-up kids. I know that if we'd lost sight of them completely through something that they were doing, and they came back, however messed up things had been, we would be overjoyed to see them. And I know that would have been the same, in my case. And that's the fatherhood, isn't it? The crazy love.
Yeah, but it is God.
Yeah, that's what I know.
Which is what we were, because it's the Micah thing, and he was talking about these things relative to God.
Yeah.
That is how we are to regard him. That he loves mercy. And any chance he gets to show mercy, he will show mercy. Which doesn't I know that doesn't mean everybody gets away with everything. Of course they don't. But if that isn't the dominant force in what we believe and try to talk about, I think we probably could easily lose our base note. And I don't know. It's never easy with her.
Because of the bass note, that ringing through over the years. That it's kept people coming back to something that underpins everything really. And again, if you think about the prodigal, as I said, all these ourselves and whole church organizations running off, trying to make it all gorgeous and fun and spending our inheritance, if you like, and then coming back miserably to God and finding that it's okay to start again, whether it's an individual or a church or whatever. There's a wonderful song, isn't there, by Matt Redman, I'm Coming Back to the Heart of Worship. It's all about you. And I think again and again in some of the greatest hymns like Amazing Grace, you're talking about somebody who had reached the bottom of themselves and discovered that Amazing Grace was there for them. I mean, Newton had been the captain of a slave ship, hadn't he?
Yeah.
And coming to that point, Amazing Grace. And yet these things kind of turn into a nice tune that we sing without forgetting the depth of that bass note, the resonance of it.
That's right. We did. I mean, briefly, we looked at the Lord's Prayer as well, didn't we, during the weekend? And the fact that it begins with Jesus, not because God is the name on the headed notepaper, but because it's crucial to his life. Begins. If it had been him saying about himself, "My Father who is in heaven," the one who loved him and said at one point, "This is my son, and I'm very pleased with him." The one who made it possible to keep going through days and weeks and months and years of temptation to do all sorts of things. And actually, we did look at a couple of limericks too, didn't we?
Well, of course we looked at some limericks. But this was because obviously we moved on to Jesus. And we moved on to his love of mercy, but also to his ingenuity and wit. And that's why I say that if we're exploring the bass note, it doesn't have to be just that it's dull and turgid and sort of ploddy, because the wit in the love of mercy that Jesus showed, and the servant king, the humility of Jesus, and his particular desire to see justice done, to see the kingdom here on earth.
Well, these are three women who are not named in the Bible, and we read them to the group we were with and asked if they could, after they'd heard each one, say who they are. And I think they got it fairly quickly. Let's see a few. This is the first one.
Okay, the first one. And remember, these are the women with no names. Right. W taken in A, the M scuttled off for the day, but J was at hand to write in the sand and embarrass the D on his way.
Well, everyone knew that straight away. It was the poor lady who was taken in adultery, who one day in heaven will say, yes, I was the woman taken in adultery, but I had several other things about me that were far more interesting than that.
I don't think she'll say that. I think she'll say, you cannot imagine that moment when Jesus looked at me
that's true.
And told me to go and sin no more. And that I wasn't being stoned to death, but I was being believed in as the possibility of change.
Clean and unstoned.
Clean and unstoned. Yeah. Okay.
Who else did we have? Oh, here's another one. Was she sick? Was she dead? Was she sleeping? Views were determined and sweeping. Talitha cum, she lit up the room, and her mother served breakfast, still weeping.
And this little girl, no name. We know the name of her dad, Jairus, but we don't know her name. She doesn't really appear anywhere else as far as we know. But again, here we are. So we've had Jesus, the ingenious, the determined, the committed, but no miracle when it came to the woman taken in adultery. Here is a miracle, you've always said, of imagination, really.
Well, it's one way of looking at it, of looking at a situation and saying, no, I can see what this can be, or I can see what my father is doing. There are various ways to look at it. But when they came and said, well, now she's dead, he's been messing about with this woman, in their view, I mean.
Oh, the woman with the issue of blood.
And now she was dead. And Jesus looks into the universe and says, I see a living child.
Having breakfast.
And he goes to the house, and everyone laughs at him. Remember, and actually says
of course I do.
They laughed at him, and he walks in, and he says those words I just read, Talitha Kum, which means, little girl, get up, stand up. And she stands up, and he says, well, she's hungry, come on, and then they eat. Ages, give us some food. And her mother, I'm sure, served breakfast and wept as she did it.
And that moment, her little walk on part, if you like, or waking up part, is part of our story, isn't it?
Absolutely.
You know, it's part of the bass note that has run from way before Jesus, actually. Through, obviously, we would say the culmination in Jesus, but actually no, that was obviously the biggest thing that happened. Of course it was, but then it's been continuing ever since, hasn't it? That throb of the bass note throughout all the ups and downs, and it happened all through the Old Testament with people getting wildly wrong, David getting everything wildly wrong, coming back to God,
wildly right,
and then wildly right. Yes,
Oh, let's have one more.
All right,
nameless
one
lady
more.
then.
Here we are then. The W there by the well could not have foreseen what befell. She turned out to be a remarkable E, and heaven rang out like a bell.
Which is, of course, the woman at the well. And the heaven ringing like a bell always seemed to me absolutely right, because it's as though, if you read that, but it's worth going looking at it, Jesus thought, it's happening. It's happening. This is the Gentiles. This is happening.
The Gentiles, absolutely. It's so easy to forget these things, isn't it? That she was a Samaritan woman, that she had no deep connect with Jesus. And one of the little things that we learnt a long time about that story is that Jesus wasted time. He was on his way somewhere, but yet again, just like with the woman with the issue of blood, here is this woman sitting by a well.
He just walked an incredibly long distance.
Yes, thirsty and tired, but there was a job to be done. And here it's this remarkable Jesus discernment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, but it's not fluffy, it's important, it's vital.
It's tough.
It's tough.
And she obviously was a very good a very good evangelist, because she went home and said, I've just met a man who told me about my life. How did you know that? So that's a few of the things we looked at.
Yes, and we also had a chance to listen to some of because we were talking about the fact that as always in these situations, it was what we would call bespoke, different ways with different people, and we'd love to hear what the bass note, what the thing is that keeps you going despite and because, what is the underlying throbbing reality
of
what you believe. We'd love to hear.
Really love to know that. Anyway, we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.